Greetings and welcome to In-Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. We are at 33 Morris Street, the big black box. And this conversation that we're going to have is interesting because even talking about it, I'm starting to raise. But actually, let's just get into it. We're going to be speaking with Wendell Manwarren. Thank you for making the time, Wendell.
Thank you for taking the time.
I'm glad we're able to have the little, and we're hearing the water feature in the background and things too.
Garden.
Definitely, and I think we need some of that zen, that balance because of the decision that has been taken. And you're listening to the song, and don't know if you're saying it's the end of an era, the close of a chapter.
The beginning of the end, we call it. The last hurrah, the end of a long chapter. 30 years, we say, is a generation of vibrations, you know. And we're very humbled at that attainment, you know, and grateful that we were able to make it thus far. And we thought that, it's the end of a cycle. It's time to bring the curtain down and take one more trip, one more bow, as we go down the road.
How significant is it that you're able to make this decision? And I ask that because sometimes you have people carted out feet first. It seems as though we don't necessarily get the opportunity to see our heroes, the people we have looked at for so long, these generations. It is almost like in the African way. You do the work, and then you disappear.
Yeah. It's not easy to make this decision because I think it runs counter to our culture. I think the expectation is that you just go until you can't go no more. And it's not that we can't go anymore, we just think it is right. It's not something that emerged overnight, you know, for years, especially post-COVID, and also observing the many changes over time in the whole jouvay vibration and the way people sort of interact with jouvay and their expectations as well, you know. We think we've had a good long run. And one of the things that I'm really happy for is that we're all in accord with the decision. You know, it's not like two people feel that way. And
that's one of the things I wanted to ask about.
Like, hey, we could go some more. You know.
And because that united front and that level of resolution among everyone can help to mitigate sometimes. Well, why don't go one more? And some people might even tell you is when people was 33 that they started to turn water into wine and whatever that kind of thing. If you want to look at numbers and ball, this is a nice round number.
Yeah, we look at numbers a lot, and 33 is quite alluring and appealing because 33 that's 2 times 3 canal. You know, we like to play with numbers. Plus, it's 30 years that we will be a musical group because we started the jouvay before we started making the music. But we good. I mean, there's been a lot of pushback from our friends and supporters. But the people who know us, they know us well, they understand why we're saying what we say. And as of now, we're very committed to that decision, and we're really committed to making sure that this jouvay is our best jouvay, you know.
And I'm glad it's not as though you're just dropping a smoke bomb, or in this case with the Dirty Sailor, dropping a bottle of Amens and totally disappearing from the scene.
No, we don't intend to disappear from the scene at all. We're part of the cultural landscape. We've been for a long time, and we're grateful for that. We've built a big family. You know, we have a black box crew, we have a band, the Cut and Clear crew. We have so many other people that we interface with and interact with on a regular. I mean, having this space here, the black box, is what we call our home. And there's a place where people gather and exchange ideas and exchange vibes. And maybe we could focus more attention on doing things like that. And one of the things we thought as well is that we could focus a little more attention on telling the story, the lessons we have learned over the years in a material form so that it could encourage those who are coming forward to understand a little bit about what it is.
And that's one of the things I wanted to talk about in the sense that sometimes it feels as though if someone who has established a space around which there's so many things growing and families and offshoots, it's almost as though, not necessarily laziness, but there's no, as though other people don't feel the need to say, okay, well, let me do something as well in that direction. And specifically the mashup conversation that you recently had on Next 99, Next Level of Radio,
Rayon
with
Elborn.
Rayon Elborn.
Yeah, that was a
That's one of
really
the things I wanted to
powerful
jump
conversation.
into as well. Because looking at that meeting from the start and looking at evolution of the music, of the individual, and just that relationship that you've built with him and so many other people, how important is that to you, that type of engagement?
Very important. I think I'm a teacher by inclination, first and foremost. You know, I've been teaching a little bit of theater for about 30 years now. And my role inside the Tricanal camp, especially when it comes to showtime, is to act as the director. And many times as a director in these parts, you have to be a teacher because you're working with a lot of raw talent. And Rayon Elborn and his crew, Sinex, they came to us from our very first Queen's Hall show, which would have been 17 years ago. So we've seen them grow up, seen him grow up, see him develop as an artist and a man and a major talent, an incredible songwriter. And I think he was actually the godfather of this current iteration of the popular music, you know, what they call it Trinidad, even though he is determined to keep it on a more positive track, but he still represents that vibration. And it was interesting when they asked me to do that conversation about the evolution of rap. So I thought to myself, well, you know, rap is maybe not as popular a form as it used to be, but that doesn't mean that it is non-existent. I think it's just, you know, we like to relabel things in these parts. It still exists in that vibration. They're still speaking their truth to their reality. And it may not be a reality that we in other parts of the society wish to confront or come to terms with, but it's deadly real, you know, no pun intended. It's seriously deadly real.
And even like looking at Rapsoman, looking at that willingness to speak with a level of authenticity, and even like looking at Rayon still, there's a conversation that I recently had. There's the link up program that Costat has that is trying to build a pipeline for individuals who have been incarcerated, building capacity, be it school, entrepreneurship, both. And one of the persons, the reintegration coordinator, he said that Rayon is somebody who would have come into prison, spoken with him,
Yeah.
kind of broken bread, and told him when you need it, let me know. And in terms of that positive influence and that positive
It's
force.
funny you mentioned that because right after the interview we did the other day, that's where he was heading, to the prison to do that work, to continue doing his work, you know. And it's good to see that he, as a young man, recognizes the need to impart his skills and share what he has learned with others and encourage others to be more than they imagine they can be. Because for me, that's what it's about. I see so much. I look back at myself as a young fellow coming up with Belmont, having big dreams but not knowing how to begin to start to attain them, and then happening into the tent theater, and that changed my life. So I know the transformative power of theater and performance, and I try to encourage as many others that I encounter to give it a chance. It's not for everyone, but most people take something from it that enhances their life in some way.
And that is something that I want us to get into in terms of like that transformative power and taking pieces as you need it. Because like you said, the grouping is not homogeneous. Different people need different things. What some of those things may be, I'd like you to itemize them when we come back. Stay with us, we return after this.
Yeah.
Welcome back. It's In Depth with me, Dike. Now we are speaking with Wendell Manwarren, and not even a bittersweet conversation. So we're finding out that yes, it is the final jouvay. This is
And we want to make that explicitly clear. Last hurrah for the jouvay,
For
not
the
the last hurrah
jouvay.
for Tricanal
For
by
the
any stretch
jouvay.
of the imagination.
Thank you.
Yeah?
But
Still
in-
intend to be jamming and making songs, making shows, doing other projects.
And in terms of those, one jamming, the other projects, people coming into this space, and when I say space, I mean both as an enterprise, music, theater. What are some of the things that people get out of it?
Well, I think one of the first things they get to appreciate that it's hard work and it requires discipline. I keep stressing that hi
Hi,
there.
hi.
Every form that we engage in is whether it's singing, dancing, acting, they're all called disciplines, right? So a lot of people they think that being an artist is like I could just be whoever I want to be. But most artists are incredibly hard-working people. They burn the midnight oil, they slave, even when they're not working, ideas are consuming their minds. They're very observant, they feel strong feelings about things that most people could just sort of turn their backs to or close their eyes to. So the appreciation that it's a discipline and it requires hard work. The other thing that, particularly when it comes to the carnival, is understanding that are a part of something bigger than you. It's a tradition that predates you. So even if you want to be a singer or a mass man or a jouvay man or whatever, take time to understand the thing that you're trying to be a part of. It ain't starting with you and it's not all about you here and now because we have the power to either enhance it or distort it based on how we approach it, you know. And when I look around the carnival, I see a lot of people, and as a Trinidadian or Tobagonian, everybody could just jump in, throw their hat in the ring and do a thing, right? But for me, if you don't take the time to go through the ropes, like we're doing the story of the sailor mass, right? And one of the things that came out is that a sailor couldn't just decide to give himself a rank. The older sailors had to decide based on your dancing and how you carry on yourself last carnival if you deserve to move up in the ranks. So that's an interesting thing, right? There's a pecking order and there's a rite of passage and it have dues to be paid. And things like that I think are very important to pass on to people. I think when you pass through a process like this, you develop grit. Yeah? There are times when it's hard and you have to push, and there are times when you push past yourself and you discover yet another self. I learned this from a Mokajambi who was talking about his fear of heights is his motivating factor for walking six as amazingly as he does. He says he spends most of his time trying not to fall, and he's one of the most incredible stick walkers you could find. You know, so things like that. They have all kind of metaphors that emerge that seem very simple on the surface, but have great depth when you think about it.
Well, that reminds me, easy lesson make for hard is, huh? But that example of the Moko drum, and we're talking a lot and I have a lot of poetry, but that makes me want to go back to something I said earlier and ask, is it a matter of turning off feeling or channeling that feeling?
I say it's a matter of channeling because you can't turn it off, but you can't be overwhelmed by feelings as well. And I think that we have cultural forms that afford us to channel. And one of the things I always like to invoke is the carnival imagination. I say because we've had a carnival for so long, because we have this tradition for so long, this ritual for so long, every year we have to approach the season or the festival and invoke our imagination. What mass are you playing this year, boy? What song you singing this year? What your costume looking like this year? You have to use your imagination. Somebody had to dig deep inside and come up with an idea. You know?
And that's one of the things I think can get lost sometimes because it doesn't translate as well. So there are the physical, tangible aspects of, okay, well, this is the costume, this is the music. But in terms of that level of spirituality, paying respect to energy and energies. So even like you hear stickman or rope jab man 40 days before the carnival.
Yeah, they have their whole ritual that they engage.
So whether or not you know because sometimes what you just see is what is on stage,
Yeah, exactly.
or what is on the road,
Yeah.
as opposed to this level and sequence that goes through.
And that's why we have to make it clear too. One of the things that we've learned over time is that it ain't one monolithic carnival. You know, it have the Mardi Gras, the fete tradition, that fete culture, that dress up and jump up culture. And then you have the masquerade, which harks back to the African tradition, which harks back, and even not just African, you have old Indian traditions like the Somari and them things that are played inside the carnival. Them come from way back, right? Somebody had to have some kind of retention, and then some kind of ancestral memory has guided their hands to make these things, you know, and you have to ask ourselves, how come of all the carnivals in the world, you know, the Trinidad Carnival is the most prolific and vibrant and still full of vibes, you know? And look at our traditional forms. Who came up with all these different things? Baby doll and jab and jab molassie and midnight rubber and Pierrot grenade. And there are few places in the world that have such a plethora of masquerade forms, you know, that we could call on, you know. And my thing is that, you know, these are traditional forms, but they're available to us now, and we have to infuse it with life now. It's not just a question of it has to be this or it has to be that. We still have to follow the shape and the form of the thing, but we could bring some new twist to it, use our imagination respectfully.
And with that, do you think we'll be seeing new forms, or what do you think it will take to bring a new form to this space? And I'm asking that, and all I'm seeing right now is Tony Hall, a blessed mention,
Yes.
with Gene Miles.
Right? So Tony Hall was one of those that mentored us from very early when we started to do a show. And whenever I was in trouble, I would call on Tony, and he didn't even have to say much, you know, just his presence was his reassuring presence that, you know, you're doing the thing, you know what you're doing. And if there was in real trouble, he'd give you some talk and, you know, a little philosophy in his own way. But the first thing we have to do is recognize that we have this carnival imagination and employ it. So like when I first started making masks with Minchell right here in Woodbrook, almost every street was a mask camp. All the masks was made right here by us, by our hands, right? Now, the vast majority of masks in the contemporary carnival is made in a factory in China, ordered online, shipped to Trinidad, and by the time you reach, you might put a little extra feathers and a few extra rhinestones on it and pretty it up to satisfy yourself. But I think if more people were to reclaim the notion that we have an imagination that affords us to play a mass, and a mass don't have to be thousands of people, a mass could be you and a partner or you and 10 people. Back to the heyday of the sailor. In the heyday of the sailor, post World War II, watching the Americans drink rum and fall down in tongue and fight and get on bad, some fellas, young fellas, decide to play a mass on them. They decide, starting with parodying, starting with imitation and mimicry and sending them up. And before you know it, a whole new form was born. And then down the line, because we keep pushing, you start getting from a plain white sailor suit to an encrusted suit, and the head start becoming bigger and bigger until it turned into something else. And Minchell said by the time it hit the late 50s, 60s, that was the heights of surrealism right here on the streets of Port of Spain. Same time Salvador Dali, who was recognized as the master of surrealism, was painting his surrealistic paintings in Spain. So we just do things instinctively and intuitively and do understand that what we're doing is in accordance with the energies at the time and what's going on in the world around us. I don't think enough people understand that you don't need no permission and that mass is not a transaction where you have to save up thousands of dollars and go to some corporate entity and hand over your thousands of dollars for the privilege of playing inside their rope and being served. You know? That's one of the things I would like to see more people
And it's
connect
interesting.
to.
And it's interesting you say that because it was the CARICOM at 50, I believe, where this minister was speaking to a sailor. Names escape me at the moment. Hopefully we find it to put it inside the conversation. And they're saying, ask him how he's doing, and then telling him thank you for the work that you've been putting in. And that exercise of the creative imagination that Rex Nettleford loved to talk about, especially like with Rastafari. But seeing something and working towards it, or not necessarily seeing it, but saying a thinker.
Yeah,
And
there's some kind of pull
exercising,
there, just exploring,
working, exploring, going towards it. Is it a matter of waiting for the next one, or mentoring that in a space like this, so people say you're free to feel forward, working towards that?
I find that, you know, it takes a long time. I say it a lot, and then I see there are certain times when people say, understand what I've been saying. You know, it's like, it's so foreign, it's so alien, the idea that you don't need that permission from nobody on high, and that it's not a transaction, that you could do it yourself. A lot of people don't seem to understand that is possible. I found a picture of my father. He recently passed in November. And in many ways, this year is a homage to him and men of that era. Them at 1920, this was in 1941, 1942 or something. So, and the war was on, so there was no carnival. But he was one of them fellas watching the sailors and decided to play a sailor mass, you know. So at 19, 20, young, vibrant men decided to make a statement on what was happening around them. You know, same time, you know, Rum and Coca-Cola and Sparrow sang about it in Gene and Diner, about the Yankees coming and changing the space with their behavior, not for the better in many regards. But they changed it, they impacted the space forever. Where we are just down the road on Rice Road they had Yankee sailors, and the Rice Road at the time was called the Gaza. You know, they had a whole set of clubs catering to them, and they used to roll out in the street and fight and get on bad. So all those things, if you know these things, if you could boom up history and sort of connect to that, you could say, yeah man, I could add that to my story and keep the vibration rolling.
Well, we want to thank you and the group for the work that you have done and the work that you will continue to do, because once again, we're stating categorically,
yeah, we ain't done.
It's just the jouvay.
We ain't done by no stretch of the imagination, but it's just we bringing down the curtain on the jouvay. We figured 30 years, a generation. We have a family that plays in front of the band for years, and they have a little box, and they have little babies in the box, and those babies have grown over the years, and they now have babies in the box. You know what I'm saying? So we're very grateful for that. We see, you know, children who have come of age, and their first introduction to the jouvay is with us because their family understand it's a safe space and people looking out for them, and we don't have no rope, you know. And we just want to stress that this rope thing don't make no sense, no way, no how. The road is the road, all of we road. All of we should have access to the road. But now you're putting your life in danger trying to cross from one side of the street to the next when them rope band coming down. But that's another conversation. And maybe we'll have time to talk more about that when we're done with the jouvay.
But if I remember correctly, to try to quote you, quoting Martin Carter, the more people of our time we are, the more our time is.
Those two lines blew my mind and still continue to blow my mind every time I encounter it. The more the men of our time we are, the more our time is. And he goes on to say, but always we've been somewhere else, muttering our mouths like holes in the mud at bottom of trenches, you know? So we had to claim the time that we're in, be men of the time, so that the time could be more, yeah? And not abdicate that responsibility and hope that somebody else will pick it up and run with it.
But talking about run with it, the time has run, or the time has
Ran away.
You understand?
Yeah.
But on behalf of the entire TTT News team, thank you so much for joining us.